New Thought Media Network proudly presents Lindsay Leimbach, Practicing Infinite Possibilities, Fridays at 10 a.m. Mountain Time, 9 a.m. Pacific. And now, here's Lindsay.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to PIP, Practicing Infinite Possibilities. And I'm excited about today's episode because we're going to be talking about the brain. So last episode, we talked about the brain and the different levels of the brain. We'll review that one. But today, we're going to get into neuroplasticity, the connection of the brain, and how do we cultivate new habits and let go of old habits and really allow ourselves to sink into that authentic self that we have inside ourselves. So it's exciting. This is the stuff I get really excited about because I'm a mindful living coach, and I come up and I help people really have some insight on habits that they have that are not serving them. There's things that they do and they're not even aware of it, what they do. And so we talk about that and we go inside and we become vulnerable and we figure that out. And then we decide, if we're not going to do that habit, that reaction, what do we want to cultivate? What does our authentic self inside of us really want to create in this world? And so then you can do that at any age, one of my very favorite people that I work with, I just love her so much. She's 89 and still working with her brain, totally with it, building new habits and practicing being authentic, loving, and kind. So it doesn't matter how old you are. All right, let me go up here and say good morning to some people. Hey, my dad and my mom and Shay. Good morning, Shay. And Wayne. Wayne's like, be the light. Yes, today we're going to cultivate that light inside of us. So I'm very excited about that. I think Trudy is probably with us. Lori is with us. So whoever, feel free to drop a comment. I don't know you're on unless I see the comments. Okay. Now, of course, oh wait, there's Trudy. I just saw her. She popped on. Yep, Trudy said hi. She is on YouTube. So it's fun that she's on YouTube. A lot of you guys are on Facebook and some of you are on YouTube. Let's go. I got some wonderful hearts that came in, and that's one thing that we always are cultivating. Let me take my banner down. No, not there. Here we go. We got this. Take this down. Okay, there we go. We got some wonderful hearts and different things. So let me just show you a few. I forgot to show you guys this one from the past. That's me when I was in Vegas. I told you about that and how I manifested and I won. And so I had to take a picture of me in front of the ace and the king of hearts. And then here's my girlfriend. I love it. Stacy sent me this. She goes, Lindsay, I was looking for hearts and her scrunchie fell on the ground. And she's like, it was a heart. Is that so cool? And took a picture. And then I had another friend who went out to breakfast with her daughter and looked over at her daughter's potatoes and saw that heart. So she's seeing a heart in her daughter's food in a restaurant. Wow. Now remember, we talk about the reticular activating system, and that is part of the brain. It's a filter system. And what is important to you, let me take this down. What is important to you will then pop up and you see it everywhere because the brain can't take in all this information that we have, all the smells, the sights, the seeing, the hearing, the feeling, all this kind of stuff. So what you do is you program your brain in this reticular activating system for what is important. And we do it all the time. reticular activating system. And we do it all the time. And so when I say we're cultivating hearts, I'm saying that is important to you. And so let's look for hearts. And if you consciously become aware that you want to look for hearts, then all of a sudden you start seeing the hearts at all different places in your world. And so we have, the PIP group, us PIP group, we're all looking for hearts. Now, some of us know that I also collect ducks, and my dad sent me a really cool duck, but I'm going to show you that next week. This week, look what I found. Is that the cutest duck? It just was speaking to me at a thrift store. That's what I like to do, thrifting. And so here we go. We got a duck in space. Fun stuff. We want to cultivate what we want in our life and what is important. And the brain leans into thinking what's important is keeping you safe, which is a good thing. We want to be safe. But it leans into looking for negative things over positive things in our life. And so we have that amygdala. Let me go up to this. Let me go to my banner. Here we go, not my banners. Go up to my pictures of our brain. This is the brain we were talking about last week. So we have 3 sections. This is the Reader's Digest version of the brain. We have the lower brain, which is always on from 0 to 4. And that's not 0 to 4, excuse me. You're born with it totally developed, and it regulates your heart and your temperature and your digestive system. But it also has your fight flight response. It has that amygdala in there, which allows you to have, if you feel danger, you can go and you can fight it or you can run away from it. And this amygdala, I like to call Amy. And then we have the middle section of the brain, which is where it's developing really fast, up to like 4 and 5, but into your whole life, because that's where your memories and your subconscious mind and how you react to love, how you react to eye contact. It stores all your memories. It's where that subconscious mind, that filter system that's in there. And then you have your higher level of thinking, which is your prefrontal cortex. And that is the red part in this picture. I'm going to take it down. So your prefrontal cortex. So this is the part that's developing. It's developing the whole time, but it's developing really fast in preteens, teens, and in your 20s. And that's where you can play chess and where you can have compassion, where you can see someone else's point of view. So what we want to develop is to have a bigger prefrontal cortex that is connected to our heart and not be run by our emotions, which is more the middle part of the brain, and the amygdala, which is the fight, flight, freeze response. Okay, so that is what, if you want to see episode 55, I really got more into detail of that. So we're going to dive a little further, deeper into the brain and talk about neuroplasticity. What is the connection? How do you make connections so you're actually learning in your life? But before we go there, like I say, synchronicity. Today I went and walked my dogs. And as I was walking my dogs, they have those wonderful people put up those libraries where they put books in that are closed off, and then you can look and then you can leave books or take books. Well, check out what I saw today. The Amazing Brain. I was like, you've got to be kidding. This is a child's book, but it's really good. And it's from Scholastic, and they were giving it away. So I got it for today, and then I'm going to give it to my grandson. And we're going to read about the amazing brain. But if everyone just knew what was in this book, we would all be amazing. It's amazing. So let's talk about neuroplasticity. Oh, you know what? I'll take that down yet. It's too soon for that. Neuroplasticity. Okay. Neuroplasticity is the understanding that the brain can wire itself in pathways so you can learn. That's the bottom line. And that it can keep programming. It's like, think of yourself as being a computer, right? And neuroplasticity is saying that you can put a computer program into your computer. The brain is the computer. But if you don't program the brain, if you don't program your computer, nothing runs on it. So what's so wonderful is the human ability to choose what you program. But choice is really a higher level thing, that when you realize you can observe and have choice. When you're young, when you're first born, you don't have a choice. You are a sponge. You have all these cells in your brain. I mean, just, I don't know the answer to this, like billions of cells. And they don't have connections. You don't know how to walk. You don't know how to talk. You don't even know how to focus your eyes right, or how to form words, to make sounds. You know, everything is developing very, very, very fast. So when you're a little kid, you sit back, especially as an infant, and whatever is happening in your world, the neurons are firing together, wiring together, and you're making all these pathways. And you have to make all these pathways. And you keep putting things together. And the brain is also at the time still growing, going, and putting all the pathways together. But you're not choosing your pathways. Your pathways are really environmental. It's what's going on around you. You don't have morality when you're 2. You don't know if something's right or wrong. You haven't really figured that out because you don't have that neural pathways structure set up. So you take on the environment of all the other things that are around you. In other words, your primary caregivers are programming and putting the programs into your brain. And it isn't a choice. It's not a choice when you're a little kid. So now we have these programs going on, and they keep going and going and going. And then when you're about 25 years old, because remember I told you the prefrontal cortex is developing really fast into your 20s, but even like 28, it matters what your maturation is. Then what happens is the brain stops growing and getting bigger, and you still can connect, but you connect with what you have. And you can also disconnect, and you can connect in other pathways. So you think, oh, what do you mean disconnect? Well, you can learn negative habits. Let's just take a habit like screaming, okay? Because that's yelling instead of screaming. Talking really loud, to get your attention. Raising your voice like that. Some families talk really loud. And so the kids think this is how you communicate. You yell at people, you scream, or you take, because that's just how the family is. There's 10 people in the family, but it doesn't have to be a large family because it yells. And so to get attention, you have to be the loudest. You have to do the actions. So when you're a little kid, those are the neurons that fire together and wire together, and you make this pathway, and it works in your household. So you can get attention, so you can get fed, and you can get tutoring, and you can get picked up at the gym. You have to scream at your mom, don't forget me, However, when you get older, those pathways have already been made, and all of a sudden you're now in your own family and you're yelling. And your spouse is looking at you going, why are you yelling? There's nothing to yell at, because he didn't or she didn't grow up in a pathway like that. They were much quieter. And so they just could say, hey, can you pick me up? And the mom would be like, okay, I'll pick you up. And there's no screaming going on. There's no competition. So those neurons didn't get fired to yell and scream to have that behavior. Okay, so now you have someone who has it connected into their brain in one way, and someone who's connected in their brain in the other. So what is mindfulness? Mindfulness is being aware in the present moment without judgment, what you're thinking about and what you're feeling. You have to be aware of the pathway that you have made without judgment. That's the big part about it, because if you grew up in a family in which people had to yell or be aggressive to get their needs met, that's what you learned. It wasn't bad. It's how you survived in that environment. But it doesn't work when you're working at Google, or working at Ross or working in a library. Those pathways don't work in a different environment. So you have to be aware that you have those pathways. Don't beat yourself up that you have this. My voice starts raising higher and higher, just like my mom's did or my dad's did, because that's what you learned when you were young. You have to be aware of that. And if you're aware of that, then you can choose to do something different. All right, now I'm going to throw this up. Let me run over to just look at the comments real quick. So, oh, thank you, Wayne. Thank you. I appreciate you being here and giving out. This is what Wayne says. White circle with silver ring around it. Yes. Non-judgment light around us. So we can be aware. See, our higher consciousness needs to be aware of the programming that we have when we were a kid, and how is that programming working now? And in other words, for a program is a habit. Okay, so we're built with tons and tons of habits, that automatic pilot. When if I go back to, let's see, I gotta get this. If I go back to this one more time, the yellow brain is your habits. In this picture, the middle brain, it's your automatic pilot. It's just things that you've learned, and you learned them when you were really young. So when you're tired and you're not making a choice, when you're not making a higher level conscious choice, when you're not connected to your heart and seeing it from Buddha nature or Christ consciousness, or whatever way you want to look at it, your executive thinking, heart, mind, compassionate mind. When you're not looking at it like that, you're on automatic pilot. You're actually just redoing what you've done almost a million times that you learned when you were 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And now I'm 56. And those behaviors might not work. Some of them might work. So like my parents taught me to be very have good eye contact, things like that, and so they do work for me. Okay, so let me show you this. This is another way of seeing it, and this really works for me. When you're little and young, when your brain is young, think of your brain as being a beautiful white snow-covered field. Beautiful. There's nothing in there. There's no pathways that have been made. But then you need to learn how to, let's say, ride a bike. Okay? So you get in there, and for the very first day, now imagine this, I'm going to take this off, but imagine that white pathway, okay, snow-covered way. You want to get to learn how to ride a bike. So you want to build a pathway in your brain. So the first time you walk through snow, it's really hard, right? It's crunch, it's hard. It's tiring. The first time you get on a bike, you wobble, you have training wheels, you're scared, it's all new because the pathway hasn't been made in your brain yet. You haven't gone through it, but you go through it that one day. Okay. Now the next day you get on your bike and your brain has a very loose pathway, just like a very loose pathway in the snow made. It's a little easier because you did some work and there is a little bit of connection going on. But the next day you do it and you're like, and it's still hard, but you can kind of get it. You're getting it. Okay. Well, you do it for a week. And the pathway then gets very solidified in your brain. And so you keep building on the pathway from the day before. You see what I'm saying? You build from the day before. You don't start over. Just like if you were going through the steps of the snow, as you go down it, sooner or later, the pathway is clear and you know how to ride a bike. And the more you do it, the better you get. It gets wider and wider and easier and easier. That is amazing that the brain does that. It's amazing that you have the capability of doing that. Okay. So if you're learning how to play the piano, same idea. You're learning a new language. You have to realize literally these electrons and neutrons and all these things, this pathway are going through. and building the pathway, and you have to build and build and build and build and build. Now, as an adult, and I'm learning a new habit or a new skill, I need to make a conscious choice. It takes energy to learn something new. Okay, because now my brain has tons of pathways in it already made. And the brain, really, guys, want you to lean into this. The brain wants to use the least amount of energy possible. The least amount of energy possible. Okay, that is human nature. You want to use the least amount because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and you have to be able to be rested for tomorrow. So it's in our DNA that we want to use the least amount of energy. That's why learning something new is not something that people tend to lean into to do right away, because you have to give up your resource of energy. So the brain goes, are you sure you want to learn something new? It's so much easier to do it the old way. It's so much easier just to tune out and watch TV, because then you're not having anything going on in the brain. You're really just in rest mode. But as we grow, we know that we want to learn something new. And now the greatest thing, I'll show in the picture here, that here's a picture. See the electrons on top of the guy's head, and then the image that's coming out here. See, the red image means that a lot of blood's going there and a lot of circulation. Now they know what's going on in the brain and how the pathways are formed. And they're realizing if you don't use it and you're older, you lose it. We know that with our muscles, right? If you don't walk around and exercise, then you know what? You just, the muscles just disappear, and it goes in and gets built into fat. And then you are not healthy. Same with the brain. We got to maintain the pathways we have, and we also want to cultivate new pathways and keep it going and keep it learning and keep it growing. And if you don't do it, you lose it. So you want to practice with your memory, then play memory games, play games, work on things, work on skills, things like that. Learn how to play the piano when you're 60 and 70. Why not? Is it harder? Yeah, it is a little harder to learn new skills when you're older, because remember the pathway of the snow? When you're young, there's nothing there. So the brain is just like, man, give it to me, because it needs to learn, it needs to connect, it needs to know how, it needs to build those pathways. And then it builds all the pathways, and the ones that aren't built, it starts to shed those cells off. So you need to keep practicing. Practice meditation, practice kindness, practice the skill of mindfulness, right? And that's why you show up to things like, PIP and things like that, because you guys are in this practice. So it's now I want you to know something else that's different. And you say, well, that's really great, Lindsay. You have taught me about that we need to learn new things and how the brain is wiring and how we're programming going on. What about old skills, things I learned when I was young? Maybe bad habits, smoking, biting your fingernails, or maybe even good habits like riding a bike, speaking Spanish, and I haven't done it in a while. What happens there? Well, when you don't use it, okay, think of the snow. The snow starts to fill up that pathway. When you don't use it, it kind of starts blocking it up, right? And it can even look like the pathway is gone. But is it really gone? The answer is no. It's just really disconnected, and it's gotten old and weak. So you don't use it, and it's good, and your brain doesn't want to use it because it would take energy to get it reactivated. But if you haven't ridden a bike in 10 years and someone gave you a bike, you could get on that bike, and it's not like you're a newbie. You would get in, you would wobble, and your brain literally is like, wait a second, bike pathway. 10 years ago, I had a pathway that was bike pathway or speaking Spanish pathway. or smoking cigarettes pathway. I can find it. I can, oh, here it is. And you can dig out that pathway. You can reconnect it really, really fast. So you could say, well, within 10 minutes, I could be riding a bike again. Maybe not as good as when I was 13 years old, zooming around, but I certainly am not starting from ground zero. And I'm like, woo, and I could ride around and have fun again. So I can reopen those pathways, which is good when you're talking about a good habit, but it is also something you have to be aware of when you're talking about a negative habit. That's why you have to be very mindful about what you're doing. So I'll be real honest. I used to smoke and I really liked it. I like smoking. I smoked with my friends. It was in the 80s. Not that that's a good reason to smoke, but we would drink coffee and drink Diet Coke and we'd sit around and chat. And it was a good way to meet guys in the bars. I could go bum a cigarette. We had these whole conversations. So there was so much attached, not only a physical condition, biological condition up from the nicotine, and then also a stress reliever, but it was also a fun, it was dopamine. It added a lot of things in my life that seemed pleasurable. But we all know smoking is bad. And I absolutely stopped smoking. So what did I have to do? I had to break that pathway, right? And allow for the snow to go back in so my brain wouldn't be desiring it. And even sometimes like I'll hear a certain song from the 80s and I'll be like, I remember smoking cigarettes to that song. But I don't have to fall back in. I can be mindful and know, why does that come up and occurred in my thought pattern, and then say, no, but I'm not going to smoke cigarettes. But if I went and started to pick up a cigarette today, and the first one it would be hard on my lungs because I haven't smoked in years and years and years. But I'll tell you, after a while, my brain would open that whole pathway up and say, girlfriend, let's remember the good times. And I don't want to do that. And I don't want to do that. So this is what about mindful living and understanding the brain, that you have these pathways already in your brain from past, right? From past programming. Good or bad, it doesn't matter. It's past programming from your childhood. And on some of the programming, you don't even remember, because we don't remember 0, 1, 2, 3. But let me tell you, your brain was wiring and firing together like this at that time. So you learned a whole bunch of stuff way back when that you don't remember. So now, being 56, being 36, being 28, being 77, or being my friend who's 89, we need to be aware when these thoughts and these feelings arise. They're arising from down deep within ourselves, and they're coming across. And we need to not just step into the thought or the feeling. It's just a thought and a feeling that's arising from different pathways that we have had from the past. And so we say, look, I'm thinking about smoking a cigarette. And you think, that's the most ridiculous thing. I'm going to let that one go. But I'm not mad at myself or think that I'm a bad person that the thought came up, because I have the power of choice. I have the power of choice. And what's so beautiful about being a spiritual being, having a human experience, the brain is the human experience. The spiritual being is being able to observe. The spiritual being is able to observe the human experience, and then you get to have a choice with the filter system of love, kindness, generosity, and have patience, and have practice, and have forgiveness. And then when you realize this is going on with yourself, then you realize this is going on with my children, with my husband, with my wife, with my neighbors. They all have this too. This is why you can't take life so personally, because you do not know what's programmed in someone else, and they might not even know what's programmed in themselves. So you realize they have this whole programming going on. And if you say something to them and they have this reaction, it's not so much about what you said. that's giving you the facts. You have to realize their reaction is their own through their own programming from their own childhood and their own life to what you said. So you can't take other people's behaviors as personal responses to yourself. The only person you can be personally responsible for is yourself. And we're talking about doing it from the higher level of thinking. So we're aware of what we're feeling and thinking. All right, this is good stuff. I could talk and talk and talk about it. I am going to actually take this and let it go into next week and bring in Einstein. And how do we actually do the reprogramming? So we're going to do that next week. I want to shout out to Claudia, and Doug. They're friends of mine who are, I think, at the Delaware beach. I'm so glad that you've joined me. So today was awesome. It went by so fast. I just love that you all showed up. I hope this was helpful. Feel free to keep sending the hearts. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can message me or like here, go to centeredmoment@gmail.com. And I just want to thank you. I hope that we all can have mindful living, understanding our brain, being aware of why we do stuff. So when we have a feeling or a thought, we don't have to act on it. We can realize it's just rising up from information we might have from the past, but it doesn't define us in the present moment because we have the power of choice. And that is awesome. I want to thank New Thought Media Network for everything that they do for us. This is a nonprofit organization. So when the time comes to be giving, please remember them. I really appreciate it. So until I see you guys next week, and we're going to get into a little bit of what does Einstein say about this and how can we reprogram our brain with our higher consciousness and let go of things that don't serve us. I'll see you then. Have a great one, everyone.